Hey, Gary's Gulch, welcome back. So I have two amazing people with me today. It just so happens that on a ride-along, his first podcast ride-along is my dear friend, longtime good friend, Paul Seitz, who's with me at Paradigm Life. We were on a submarine together over 20 years ago now. Both ended up commanding nuclear submarines. And if you're a client of mine, you've probably met Paul. If you haven't, you will soon. Amazing guy, amazing man of his faith in Christ, and is a very good fit for what we're going to talk about on today's podcast. Paul, thanks for joining me on our first get-together on a podcast.
Aloha. Thanks for having me, Gary.
Yeah, so Paul lives out in Hawaii. The Aloha reference, for those of you that are too redneck to know and haven't traveled the world. That's what they say in Hawaii. Paul retired there after leaving command, and mainly because his mother and father-in-law were there and needed some help. And so he and his wife took on that journey. This is the neatest chapter of their life. The other part about needing help, though, is that they both wrote a lot of Christian books. A lot. They were prolific. I have one of them right here in front of me in a beautiful leather-bound cover that I pick up from time to time during the day, which my other guest, Dale, says is a good idea, and we'll get into that here in just a second. And so Paul not only learned a tremendous amount from them, has walked very closely in his faith with his bride and his children, and is now in charge of their trust or their estate. And so he's helping those books stay alive. A very good fit, and it was God who put him on this podcast. Of course, the focus of our conversation today is with my client and dear friend, Dale Young. And so Dale wrote a book recently that is about exactly that. It's about your faith and how to make that make sense in your world, specifically for business owners. Dale, and his probably most basic description of Dale, is that he's currently a coach. He's been a businessman for 50 plus years. And somewhere along the way, I think Dale will tell us this is part of his journey about how did you come up with this and why a book, is that he was leading people, managing people in the old-fashioned way, which was just beat them on the head until they did what they were supposed to do, and it just wasn't that much fun. And then he found that if he started leading from his faith, that the team started doing much better and his life was much better. I may have stolen a little bit of thunder, Dale, but Dale is from the Texas area. I'll let you cover all of that. And just a good friend of many years. We met in a mastermind that we had with Kyle Wilson a few years back. So Dale, welcome. And please just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Gary. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm so glad you brought Paul into the conversation as well. It's always great to talk to multiple people at the same time about my passion, really. So I am in the Fort Worth area, actually outside the city limits of Fort Worth on the west side, about halfway to Weatherford. So Dallas, Fort Worth, and go west about 60 miles from the airport, and that's where I am. I've been here about 5 years. I actually was in the McKinney area, northeast of Dallas, before that, but fell in love with a woman that was living over on this side of the town with her daughter, and she said, I'm not leaving my daughter or my kids or my church. So I had to walk into the church and see if that was going to be a fit before I got too serious. And it was a fit. And then we were planning on a late 2021 wedding, and God moved up the timeline because that was the hottest housing market in the country. We started looking for a house, and God found it for us in 3 days.
Yeah, well, that's very good that you did that because you didn't have to go through putting off the wedding during COVID like everybody else did.
Literally, we had no realtor on Monday morning, and we had a signed contract on Wednesday evening. I mean, in the hottest housing market in the country. How does that happen? God got involved. We had to move up the wedding, and we took a flight out to Las Vegas and got hitched out there, and then we had reception later. It just all works out, but it's been one of the best moves of my life. Of course, it is my second marriage after the first one ended in divorce. The church that I'm part of has really supported me in terms of helping me with my own personal growth and my own spiritual growth as well. I thought I had grown a lot spiritually. I had grown a lot spiritually, but they've taken me to another level. So that's all been a good thing.
Yeah, we all grow in our faith and probably just in overall knowledge. But I think mainly faith is what I'm experiencing. I think this time I finally figured out what I'm doing, why I'm doing this business, why I'm here, why whatever's happening. And what I've realized in my maturity here is that it's just a stepping stone to the next thing, because the actual purpose is discovering God. That's the actual purpose of being on the planet. And so I have no idea if what I'm doing today, I've now finally humbly said, I don't really know if what I'm doing today is just a chapter or it's the thing. I look back on it and I would say Mother Teresa, I think she kind of had figured out what her purpose was. Jesus did. And there's a few other people in history. The rest of us just never really either questioned it or just accepted it. And finally, I think I'm in the accepting role. Paul, how about you, man? Do you know where you're headed and what you're doing? Are you clear?
Yeah, I think I appreciate that, Gary. And Dale, my father-in-law, loved leadership books. That was the book he always wanted to write was a book about Nehemiah on leadership. And he called it A Leader After God's Own Heart. It was his second book, and his advice always was to start with your second book because the second book is a lot easier to write than the first one. But he was very passionate about it. And I would just say, post-Navy transition, I had a great 26 years in the submarine force. Gary was my first mentor and boss, and really appreciated all that I learned from him. But I've learned to separate over time. The submarine force has a set of virtues that they really want you to achieve: integrity, accountability, initiative, toughness, and some others. But those virtues, while incredibly valuable and crucial really to make any organization work, you have to have a virtuous people. And America is founded on the concept of our founders believed that a limited government is only possible when you have a virtuous people. So, but that's the first step. The second step then is to understand that the purpose of that virtue is sanctification, spiritual growth, faith, and a relationship in Christ. And that's really where I'm at. So what I do now, and I look at the gifts that he's enabled me with. I'm mathematically very good, just natural gift there. And I understand money and sound money and the importance of managing it well. And I love people, and I want people to be successful. So for me, coming in as Gary's partner, being able to provide client support and really just have those valuable conversations on how can I put you in charge with your own virtues, your own skills, your own talents to manage your money effectively, where a lot of people just don't want to think about it. That's the way my father-in-law was. I want to serve God. I don't want to think about money. He turned that all over to somebody else. And so when I came in and took over the estate, I made a lot of changes to really optimize and make it more efficient, to look after my mother-in-law, who's a wonderful lady. So that's all gone well. And now I help my church with finances. I'm their deacon for finance and putting them all on a better stream where the money is not just sitting in a checking account, but doing something valuable, but not at risk. Right. And so it's a lot of that balancing. It's stewardship is really what I would say is my passion and vision, is to help people achieve and understand stewardship in their own financial life so that they can focus on putting their unique talents and gifts to the best service and achieve the ends that God wants them for here on earth.
Thanks. Yeah, that's cool, Paul. Great perspective. Dale, there's those of you who are watching this on video clips, there are like 300 books behind us. All three of us have tons of books. So you wrote one. I'm humbled because I have not. I wrote a couple of pamphlets and participated in a few. A big effort. Why do you go through that? What was the purpose?
The short answer was because God told me to. That's the basic bottom line. The journey at this part, let me back up and talk about the whole journey, just at some highlights. I grew up in not really a Christian household, but not an atheist household or anything like that. Really prayed the prayer at age 25, but really had no life change, didn't really understand what I was doing. And then age 44, late life Christian, I started really following Christ and really learning about stuff and everything. And during that time, I had gone through a series of growth steps in my own profession. I fell into computers. It's God ordained, really, but he got me into computers in college. And I got a computer science degree in 1975, one of the first degrees awarded in computer science at UT Austin. And I made a career out of computer stuff for a long time. And that led me into leading people and all that sort of stuff. But really it was in 1992, I was actually stationed, so to speak. I was working for a defense contractor in Australia. And there was this piece where I basically said out loud, this is just a job, not a career. And I knew that I wanted something different. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a career. A career, that set me on what ended up being a 30-year journey, from career to what's the bigger thing, to coaching, to more spiritual growth, to all this other stuff. And finally in 2022, I really landed on the word calling. Okay, and Paul talked about purpose a little bit. I think we all have purpose. We all know that we have purpose. We all want a purpose. We want a direction for our lives. We want a goal to go after, right? Even Steve Jobs said, everybody wants to leave their own dent in the universe, right? It's that kind of thing. We want to have an impact. We want to know that our lives had meaning. And I think of purpose at multiple levels. Purpose is, what's my purpose for this year or for today? Those could actually be almost considered goals, really, in some cases. But there's bigger things. What's my purpose for interacting with my family? What's my purpose for leaving an impact on my family? What's my legacy? One of the guys at the latest, Kyle Wilson, has said, a legacy is not just what you leave behind when you leave. A legacy is also what you leave when you leave the room. It's a good thing to think about, right? What are you leaving when you leave the room? Are you leaving it better than when you entered? And what kind of impact are you wanting to have on the world? Okay. And so I think that God gives us a divine purpose. And that divine purpose is what we are supposed to do with our life. What's our big function in life? And working at this job or working on that job or working at some other job, that's all stepping stones. Those are assignments in the day-to-day style of doing things. But then there's also this thing called calling, right? And I believe God calls us forward. God has a pull on our life, our calling on our life. Romans 11:29, for the gifts and talents of the Lord are irrevocable. Okay? They're there. They're wired into you, but they're not necessarily going to be obvious unless you mine for them, unless you dig for them a little bit.
Yeah, unless you have to dig for them and pay attention and ask a lot of other people what your talents are and try things, right?
And the things that are so easy to you, that you do so natural, that you think aren't anything special, other people look at you with amazement and say, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And for me, it was always working with computers. I just always had a knack to make the computers do what I wanted them to do. And I also wanted to talk to the end user to find out what they needed it to do. I didn't really want anybody in between. That was something that was strange with me and my IT side of things.
What do you think, what age is, in your experience of these people, all the people you've coached in business and just in life, what age are people waking up to these most important talents that they have?
It happens at different times with different people. I've seen some 25-year-olds that are really going after what they want to do in life, okay, and they're just really plugged into their whole goals and what they want to do with their life and such like that. We both know Andrew, for example. He's one of those. He's a go-getter. He's going after the stuff that he's working on. But there are other people that can be age 50 or 60 and they still don't know what they want to be when they grow up, okay? All right. Part of your role in life is to figure out what you want to be, figure out what God wants you to be, and then go after it.
Yeah, absolutely. In your book, The Power of Aligning Faith and Business, you talk about some kind of practical takeaways. And one of those is just actually taking 5 minutes to plug in with God. And I find that to be one of my, if I'm up here admitting my challenges, that's one of my challenges. I do plug in every once in a while. I can't say that I consistently do it 5 minutes every day. And I'm talking to my coach, who I do check in with on the calendar once a week. And often it gets down to either me recognizing before she says it or her saying, have you asked God about that one yet? So I get direction, and then I'm this type A dude who jumps out there and I'm just like, what I really need to do is focus on getting these things done without ever checking in. And it's like the dude who's out there sailing to the new world with his compass, but he doesn't look at it. I don't have time to look at the compass. I know where I'm going, right? And you just get so far off path that you're beating your head on the wall until you realize, oh boy, okay, yep, that's what I'm screwing up now again.
Yeah. A plane takes off from Los Angeles and is 1 degree off. And they're headed for New York. 1 degree off will put them in Miami or something like that. It's really impossible. So if you don't check in and say, okay, am I on course? Am I doing what I need to be doing? So
Yeah. So what does the journey look like if somebody has no idea what they're doing? You ask them, what do you identify as? What's your identity? And I'm a bricklayer. Why are you a bricklayer? Because I need to put food on the table. They feel like they're really lost. What does the journey look like?
The journey starts in several different places, okay? But in general, I always like to start with assessments for most people, because assessments give you a clue. They don't tell you everything, but they give you a clue. And I'm talking about some good assessments. DISC, Myers-Briggs are okay to get started, but Clifton Strengths has a depth to it that can take you a whole lot further. There's a new one out called the Purpose Factor Assessment that I'm just now getting certified in, that actually has some really valuable information to it. There's all kinds of others. There's, Strengths Index, and there's tons of them out there. And I've seen a lot of them. They're all good in certain ways. But here's the thing with assessments. You can't just take them and read a report. Because you're going to read the report, you're going to say, yeah, that's kind of me.
It's like reading your horoscope, right?
Or like with the Clifton Strengths, you take the top 5 with the Clifton Strengths and you look at those and say, yeah, that's what I do. And you put them in the top drawer of your desk and you never look at them again.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that we found that everybody has between 8 and 16 signature strengths. These are strengths that they're kind of like skin. You can't turn them off. They're always there. They're always working for you. You can't turn them off. And those are things, that combination is so unique. There, what's the figures? Something like having the top 8 Clifton Strengths in the same order as anybody else in the world is something like 7.1 billion to 1.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's only 8 billion people on the planet. If you know your top 8, you know your uniqueness. And I just think that's something that God has wired into us. He knows, he created each one of us uniquely. Psalm 39:13, knit me together in my mother's womb. Okay. He created me uniquely to do certain things. Okay. I think it's incumbent upon me to find out what those things are. I need to know what I do and how I do it. And how I do it, a great assessment for that is The Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. Patrick Lencioni likes to say that if Myers-Briggs is the noun of who you are, then Working Genius is the verb of what you do. And it's actually a good way to look at it. So, and I start with those two because that gives a foundational layer of identity and community. Identity being who you are internally, community being how do you react with the world around you. And the community is so important because the community can be your family of origin, your family of choice right now, the family of how you built, your church family. I don't know if you play pickleball like Kyle Wilson, your pickleball family, all that sort of stuff. Who do you hang around with? Jim Rohn said you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. Okay, that's a community.
But it's not backwards like that. It's not like you become like them because you hung around with them. It's you chose to hang around with them because they aligned with who you are, I think.
There's a little bit of both.
Yeah,
Because community influences your identity, but your identity influences the community as well.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so I've got a classic Venn diagram where I have identity, community on the bottom circles, and I have calling on the top circle.
Yeah.
And I've actually labeled that in the book, the triad of significant impact.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't know all 3 of those pieces, and if you're not making an impact in all 3 of those pieces, you'll make an impact, but you probably won't be significant.
Yeah. I want to come next to that. You talk about hardwiring the alignment, getting the neuroscience wired in so that you're operating in business in alignment with your faith, right? Before I get there, though, Paul, I was thinking about you spent decades on submarines like I did, around people, new people just starting their positions. Everybody's constantly moving to new positions. And so we developed our way of figuring out, and you do probably the same thing in your church today as you mentor young individuals. What lessons have you learned on how to the best environment or just the best way to help people figure out what they're good at and what others are not, or what they're not good at maybe?
I think Dale's got this one solved way better than I do. Sounds like he's put a lot of thought into the tools and
tools,
paths.
yeah.
For me, it's just a matter of building relationships, and you find out what is the thing in this person's life that brings them joy, right? What is it that they love to do? And I have raised 5 children and watched them all go off in their own directions. And I am a science and math nerd, so I wanted all my kids to finish calculus. Not one of them did, and they all went in completely different directions. It's beautiful, and it's been amazing to watch because their set of gifts and callings and talents, uniquely different from mine, has taken them in different places. So I think there's a factor of listening and not forcing somebody into a mold of this is what a successful person looks like. But to Dale's point is understanding that unique set of talents and DNA that makes them who they are. And it all goes back to the purpose, right? The chief end of man, according to the Westminster Confession, is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So that is our purpose. That is our ultimate goal. The how is endowed by the set of unique talents and skills that he gives us. And when we operate inside those unique talents and skills, that path becomes very clear, and we do glorify almost automatically without even thinking about it, right? Because Christ said that if the people weren't there, the rocks and the stones would cry out. Nature is designed to glorify God. We are designed to glorify God. He's given us tools and talents to do that. And now we just have to get our minds and our modern culture out of the way and recognize that those skills and talents are there for us to operate in. And I know for myself, I just found, I am a systematic guy. And so that course correction, those little brief alignments, Dale, that you were talking about, for me, it's just, I realized early on that nobody was controlling my schedule anymore, and I had to figure it out for myself when I retired from the Navy. Like, wait, nobody's telling me I have to be where and what to wear and all this stuff. So I just found I needed to find a way to give my first fruits to the Lord in the morning. So I go for a walk. I have a Bible reading plan that is audio, so I can do that while I'm working out in the morning. And then so I walk, pray. That sets my day in full and complete alignment before I ever open up my computer. It's a pay yourself first, right? What is the thing that's going to align me and set my day, my attitude in the right place? And so giving that first hour. Now for me in Hawaii, that means I'm up
like
at
10 a.m., right?
Yeah, yeah, so that I can be at my computer by 4 and ready to work, or 4:30 really. But that's just the cost. But that cost is a small one to pay. Martin Luther said that he had to get up at 2 a.m. to pray because his day was so busy he didn't have enough time. Right. So, but he knew that the first fruits principle is important. Give the first part of your day to the Lord. Let him course correct you and align you spiritually. And then that enables you to use your gifts and think about it that way.
That's powerful. Okay. Tell me about how we hardwired this stuff together, Dale. I'm definitely missing that part.
The thing is, it's unique to each individual, right? And that's why it has to be coached. You have to be coached through it, because it's just like people will see some pieces. When you were on a submarine and you were trying to bring a new person in, Paul said it, you looked for the joy. You looked at what made them happy, what fulfilled them. That's what the assessment's just shortcut. The Working Genius is all about the energy and joy. What gives you energy and joy during your day? Clifton Strengths is about that, energy and joy. And so the fact is that if you're in joy, typically you're going to be energized. And when you do that, the day flies past, okay? When Paul starts out his day with an hour dedicated to the Lord, that energizes him right there. That's probably enough to carry him through the day all by itself if it had to. Okay, and I'm sure that he recharges during the day, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, whatever, just like we all have to do. But the fact is, if you're working at stuff that just pulls you down, it's going to drag. It's going to take 8 hours. Is going to seem like 60.
Yeah.
And
it's just those nudges, sometimes baseball bats to the forehead, that you're on the wrong path, right? You're not in alignment.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
We've all felt that, I'm sure. I have no doubt.
So you got to get that triad done. You got to get that alignment in place there to a certain extent. And then you refine it as you go.
Yeah.
The next thing that I talk about typically in the book, though, is what is the destination? Because we all want a destination. And how do you define in a coaching book a destination that works for everybody? And so the destination I came up with is complete and aligned success. Okay, we all want success, okay, and I will argue you're not really a failure unless you quit. Okay, if you keep going, you can get to success, okay, typically. Sometimes the success is recognizing you're chasing the wrong thing and you have to turn around and go someplace else. But that's success too, right? We all know what aligned success looks like now. It works with you, works how God created you, and all that. Where does that complete come in? Complete and aligned success. How's that different from just aligned success? Complete and aligned success. There's this interesting word, Paul may know about it. It's called teleos. It's a word from Greek in the New Testament, often used like in Matthew 5:48, it's used, be perfect as the Lord is perfect, or as your heavenly Father is perfect. But I would argue that perfect is a very poor translation of that, because in perfect in English, it has this connotation of never doing anything wrong, never sinning and everything. So how can you say we're always going to sin and yet be perfect? It's got the wrong connotation to it. A better translation of that Greek word teleos, and I write a whole appendix on teleos because I did a deep dive into that, but it was fascinating to me where this had all come from. A better translation of teleos is around complete and mature and having everything that's needed. Not that you're not going to mess up, but that you can correct it and keep going and get to the place. And so that's where the complete word comes from. Okay. Complete and aligned success. And so if you define, okay, you're headed towards complete and aligned success, whether you think you are or not. What do the factors for your journey look like on that? And that's where some really deep coaching can come in, is how do you put that together? How do you pull those dreams and desires and things that are deeply buried within you? How do you get those out to the surface so you can actually put a plan together and say, maybe for you, Gary, this agency where you're taking care of all these financial roles, maybe that's a big piece of it. And then I'd say, what's on the next side? What's the next layer? What do you want to do after you get that? Or is that enough? That's where you have some coaching discussions around that. And then where you get to after that, I've got a whole set of things called the alignment way. There's 4 big principles. You visit them in the order that you need to visit them on. I don't want to take time to go into those right now today on this podcast, but you can find them in the book. And on the other side of that, I believe you get to really the ultimate destination for everybody, which is peace, joy, and direction. We've already talked about joy. When you're working in your talents and your gifts, you have that joy. When you put all those together and you're going after the right thing, you have the direction. You have the clarity to go after what's important.
I'm glad you brought up telos, because I'm going to have to go read your appendix on this, because it's a concept of great interest to me. Especially, we've raised our kids with classical education as a model, which means you trace through ancient Greek. So that telos has a pre-Aristotelian definition in ancient Greece. Then Aristotle really filled it out to that eudaimonia, or flourishing, his concept in the Nicomachean Ethics. Then Aquinas took that Aristotelian concept, made it a Christian interpretation of the Gospels, and really kind of defined medieval philosophy and theology based around that whole flourishing, monia, telos concept. I love that you brought that up, and I love that you wrote an appendix on it. That's amazing.
The other appendix that I wrote that I thought was pretty cool was the last one. I realized that I'd been talking about this disconnect between faith and business. And we all think about the disconnect of faith and business as the Christian that goes to church on Sunday but has no relationship with God the rest of the time. But there's also, that's one end of the bell curve, right? What's the other end of the bell curve? The other end of the bell curve is the person that's so solid a Christian that they don't actually build a business because God will provide. I don't need to charge as much money
Yeah.
as these other people.
Yeah.
And they never actually get a successful business in place. And so the last chapter that I put in the book was chapter 7, or appendix 7. Sorry, appendix, not chapter. So it was appendix 7, and it was Jesus, history's most successful entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think, as my listeners all know, the reason that I've migrated from, you need infinite banking so that you have resources so that you can stay in control and have agency. I've not migrated, but I've expanded, grown, advanced from that to understanding that there was a period of time where, because you can only depend on yourself, I wasn't saying at the time you need to follow God and your faith and depend on Him. I was saying depend on yourself, but that was because I hadn't yet learned. I hadn't understood my journey yet. So real estate investors is an example of you depending on yourself. Then you get to business ownership, right? And the reason that I'm so strong on business ownership is because once you've identified what those talents are and you've gotten them into alignment, you can now share them at scale. I think it's a very selfish person who's on that end of the spectrum in Appendix 7 who understands everything. They understand their place. They're not sharing it at all. Or if they are sharing it, they're sharing it with their local community. Elon Musk is sharing a lot. Henry Ford shared a lot with the entire world because they understood operating the business allowed them to do that and feed many families who worked for them and do a lot of other great things in this world. So I love that you have connected those two things. It's what made us close friends from the very beginning when we first met.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree there, Gary, that God does provide, but He provides when you hustle. The Bible is very entrepreneur friendly. It's all about, you've got to put in your effort. I'm going to provide, but you're going to work. And it's true for the spouses. That's the Proverbs 31 woman brings a tremendous value to her husband, to her family. The husband also provides that tremendous value also by working. Very entrepreneurial friendly.
It goes back to, we were assigned work in chapter 2. We were assigned to take care of the garden and cultivate the garden, steward the garden. Like you said, stewardship. And then the fall happened in 3. So work precedes the fall.
Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely. Dale, they can find your book on Amazon. Now, how do they reach you? Everybody knows how to get books nowadays, but how do they find you?
Really, the best way is Dale@CoachDale.com.
Okay.
Dale@CoachDale.com.
I can't believe you got CoachDale.com. That's pretty awesome. Somebody
in
must have helped you out there
2009.
and made it available.
It was back in 2009 I grabbed it. So I've been looking out toward this entrepreneur thing for a while.
That's awesome. Anything we left out, Dale, that we need to make sure we get in here?
I think that covers it pretty well there, Gary. I just feel like this is a book God wanted me to write. He wanted me to get it out this time of the year, and he's confirmed it multiple ways, but just a little story. I said that it was Appendix 7 was my last one. Chapter 7 was my last chapter. I released it on April 7th, and it's actually my 7th #1 bestseller. So there's a lot of sevens involved.
Dale, apparently God wanted us to have a podcast together too, and with Paul, and I truly appreciate this. And I know that all the listeners will as well, because so many of us business owners just feel extremely alone. There's no community there. There's no peace for sure, and often no joy. So we need to bring those together, and I think your book is a very good start. Everybody go out there and get the power of aligning your faith and business. Dale, thanks for spending a couple minutes with us.